If you suffer from trypophobia, or you're just tired of RGB adding precious grams to your mice, these days we're trending more towards stripped down, no nonsense versions of the mice that we're already familiar with. Logitech recently did it with the G Pro X Superlight, and now the other king of gaming mice, Razer, is releasing the Viper V2 Pro, an updated version of the Viper Ultimate we saw in 2019. Is the cut in weight really worth the $149.99 that Razer is asking we pay for this? Well, let's see if we can't find that out. The Viper V2 Pro is Razer's latest update on the very popular Viper mouse. Originally released in August of 2019 as a wired version, they followed up quickly with the Viper Ultimate in October. Then they followed that up with the very popular, yet somehow still wired in 2022, Viper Mini. In the box is pretty standard stuff: a user's manual, some stickers, a note from Razer, a USB-A to USB-C cable, the dongle and the dongle adapter, and some stick-on grips, which are always a nice touch. One of the Viper's biggest strengths is its shape, and fans of the original will be happy to find out that nothing has changed here. It's still the same 126 millimeters long, 57 millimeters at the grip, flaring out at both the front and the back, and has a height of 37 millimeters. Where you will find a difference is the weight. Razer states the weight of this mouse at an impressive 59 grams. While on my scale it was coming in closer to 59 grams. That's an impressive cut next to the Viper Ultimate's original 74 grams. Razer's biggest competitor, the G Pro X Superlight, is rated at 60 grams, and this might sound crazy, but I swear it feels noticeably different in my hands. For a sanity check, I asked my wife, who has very little context regarding the weight difference, to try them out and see which one she thinks is lighter. Okay, which one of these feels lighter to you?
This one.
In order to cut the weight, Razer, just like Logitech, has cut out pretty much anything that could be considered a feature or a comfort, even accessibility features like support for lefties. Gone are the side grips that were built into the original Viper. We're left with a smooth one-piece shell. With the side grips gone, you're left with the slightly rougher texture that the Viper has over something like the G Pro Superlight. And while I'd call it rougher than the G Pro Superlight, it's still fairly smooth. I would call it grippier out of the box than the G Pro Superlight. And rather than attach grips to the mouse that might weigh down over time, Razer has graciously added removable grips to the box, so you can attach these if you feel like the mouse is a little too slippery. Another probably not intended feature is that without that smooth coating, the Viper V2 doesn't take to fingerprinting in any way, shape, or form. You don't notice fingerprints on this thing. For our main triggers, Razer's optical switches are returning. It's that same crazy fast response rate that we've seen in most of their recent mouse releases. Razer rates their Gen 3 optical switches at 90 million clicks. There were a lot of people that weren't a fan of this, and it is an acquired taste. The left-handed side buttons are gone, leaving only full support for right-handed users, although technically lefties could use the mouse if they wanted to, given that it's an ambidextrous shape. The browser buttons are much more pronounced on the V2, making them quite a bit easier to press down. The original Viper had much more flush side buttons, which some people claimed made them harder to hit, although I never ran into this problem with the original Viper Ultimate. Another feature that's been deleted, presumably to save weight, is the storage for the USB dongle, which is kind of a bummer. I am always a fan of this edition, as I have a mild panic attack anytime I have to store one of these dongles. Logitech was able to fit one on the G Pro X Superlight, and I guess maybe that's where the extra weight might come from on that mouse. I feel like there's a way to make this happen. Maybe on the next one. We're also losing dock support, which is another bummer because I was a huge fan of this. Early in the days of wireless mice, the dock on the Viper Ultimate was the deciding factor for me, pushing me into the realm of wireless gaming mice. But Razer taketh and Razer giveth. We're finally getting USB-C, a small but very appreciated upgrade. While using the micro USB on their Viper Ultimate and the G Pro Superlight doesn't really bother me. This makes it a lot easier to use a plethora of the cables I have just laying around, and I often have a USB-C cable plugged directly into my tower. And in terms of battery, Razer claims that due to a smaller yet more efficient battery, we should be getting somewhere near 80 plus hours of battery life on the V2. This is gonna be a hard thing to test, but I did my best. As soon as I got it, I charged it up to 100%. I roughly measured the time I was using it, about 6 to 8 hours per day. And after about 7 days, I had the battery down to about 63%. And after another 7 days, I was down to about 22%. So yeah, it's pretty close to 80 hours. Like with the original Viper Ultimate, Razer is switching to using 100% PTFE feet on all their mice, which on the V2 Pro seemed to be that same kind of additive free we saw on the G Pro Superlight, as they kind of have a grayish, like almost transparent hue. They're not at least not the stark white that we're used to seeing. Without dock support, we get an updated skate layout this time. So if you have any feet laying around for the Viper Ultimate, they won't technically work here. And while the additional skates are appreciated, I really got used to the idea of having 2 huge skates on the bottom of my mouse thanks to the G Pro Superlight. Given that there's no dongle storage support on the Viper, there's a lot of this empty space on the bottom. I feel like if they're not going to give us the ability to store our dongle, they should maybe at least up the amount of surface area that has a skate on the bottom. But that being said, these still feel smooth, they feel great. Even though Razer cut 15 grams of weight from this mouse, the build quality is solid. Thanks to not having the honeycomb design of other lightweight mice, the Viper V2 Pro feels really sturdy in the hand. It's light, yes, but it doesn't feel cheap. Nothing rattles on my copy, trigger stabilization is good. It feels great in the hand. Okay, so straight answers. Is this mouse worth $149.99? At the time of the original Viper Ultimate's release, if you didn't mind the optical switches, it dealt some pretty heavy blows to kind of its only competitor at the time, the G Pro Wireless. It was lighter, offered dock support, also offered more updated features. It had new sensor tech, it had updated PTFE feet, and given that we weren't planning on seeing a refresh of the G Pro Wireless at that point, the Viper Ultimate seemed like a no-brainer. These days, the decision isn't as clear-cut. The G Pro X Superlight is only a gram heavier, has storage for your USB dongle, and can sometimes be found on sale for $10 cheaper than the Viper V2. But the Viper V2 does give you updated USB-C. It really is more of a coin toss this time. And that's not even talking about some of the lower cost yet still extremely viable options out there. From not only Razer themselves, but Logitech, Glorious, Ponage. There's a lot of competition out there. So it can be hard to justify the flagship price of $149.99. But that doesn't mean it's not worth it. Generally speaking, the consensus is that the lighter a mouse is, the better you will perform with it. And the Viper V2 Pro is the lightest available version of the Viper shape that's out there. So if you're the type of person that's willing to spare no expense, and even shaving a gram of weight off of your mouse might help you improve, well, then the chances are you're probably gonna buy this mouse anyway. I don't think the deletion or the removal of certain features makes this mouse worth less than the Viper Ultimate. At the end of the day, the V2 Pro is more feature-rich in areas that will help improve your gameplay. And if you don't like the shape of the Viper, or you don't like the optical switches, then there really isn't anything I can or should say to you that would get you to buy this mouse. But if you don't know if you like the Viper shape or not, my recommendation is this, that yes, the Viper V2 Pro is the best version of the Razer Viper. However, you have the ability of picking up a much cheaper Viper Ultimate or even a refurbished version of the Viper Wired for like $25 to $30. Buy one of those versions, try it out, and if you like it, then give yourself the chance to upgrade. It's also worth noting that if you have a Best Buy in your area, there's a good chance they have a Viper or a Viper Ultimate on display. So if you're not sure about the shape, I would suggest maybe going to your closest Best Buy and seeing if they have one on display that you can try out. The market is flooded with choices. So if you don't want to pay $100 for a top-notch mouse, you don't have to. But if you know that the Viper fits your hand perfectly and you think shaving those precious grams will help your gameplay, which it did for me, then personally, I don't think price is going to be a barrier for you. It wasn't for me. For now, the Viper V2 Pro is going to be spending a large amount of time on my desk. Thanks everybody for watching. Thanks everybody for getting my last video to 7K views. That's awesome. You guys also flooded the comments with so many kind words. That's such a great motivator for me to keep making videos. Drop a like on this video if you can. Also drop a sub if you can. That would be awesome. Thanks, and I'll see you guys in the next one.